What would women dislike most if they became men? Story 1. Men don't get much social interaction out in the wild. We usually don't engage in small talk with other guys. Nice genes, buddy. And women typically don't start conversations or small talk with men they don't know. I think women might be used to the safety that comes with being around other women. But as men, it mostly feels isolating and lonely when you're out in public alone. Story 2. Constantly being demonized for existing. Being told it's never good enough. Not having unconditional love. Rarely being appreciated. Constantly being looked at and treated like an ATM. Having their valid feelings dismissed if they even share them. Having feelings you have shared weaponized against you just for the sake of winning the argument. Being called insecure and controlling for having relationship boundaries. Being demonized for having relationship preferences. Coming home from a hard labor job, in the heat, exhausted, to a combative partner. Just to name a few. There is more, though. Story 3. The violently crippling depression that you can't tell anyone about without risking making it worse because men's mental health is still a joke to a disgusting amount of people. I told people for the first time this year in my 30s that life was hard and I was getting depressed. The most I got from anyone was, "It will get better, I'm sure." No visit, no phone call, nothing from friends or family. I even, out of curiosity, said I might just throw a toaster in the bath for fun. Not a single reaction. One of the many reasons my mums are going to end up alone in a home. And people ask why men don't reach out. Story 4. The world is a lot colder as a man. It is entirely possible for a single man living alone to go days, weeks, months, or even years without any meaningful interactions. I understand that the flip side of this is that women get a lot of unwanted attention, which is probably worse due to the dangers. I find it interesting that while discussing a struggle for men, you still felt obligated to slip in a quick, but I'm sure it's worse for women. We've been worried about women for so long now, it feels blasphemous to mention men issues, huh? I knew a man who was dating a woman for a long time. One day they got into an argument over money, and the woman hit herself with a pipe and said he was beating her. The court took her side and he went to jail. She got a bunch of his money as compensation. 3 years later, a friend of the woman said that she had lied about the beating, and the guy's name was cleared. Even though his name was cleared, no one would hire him for a long time. Eventually, a Catholic high school with a second chance policy took him in as an art teacher. To this day, he was the best art teacher I've ever had. Story 5. I knew a man who was dating a woman for a long time. One day they got into an argument over money, and the woman hit herself with a pipe and said he was beating her. The court took her side and he went to jail. She got a bunch of his money as compensation. 3 years later, a friend of the woman said that she had lied about the beating, and the guy's name was cleared. Even though his name was cleared, no one would hire him for a long time. Eventually, a Catholic high school with a second chance policy took him in as an art teacher. To this day, he was the best art teacher I've ever had. Story 6. Zero emotional support and a universal expectation that you'll suck it up and do your duty like a good little stoic. The cultural subtext is that males are disposable units of labor. Also, white guys are the last acceptable target for mockery. If someone is going to be an incompetent, clueless doofus in a commercial, etc., it's a middle-aged white dude. You will be punished if you seem to care about this. Story 7. We have no allies in public, every man for himself. Seeing people cross the street if they see you coming the other way. Not having friendships with any heart-to-heart conversations. Expect your existence to be ignored. People are uncomfortable with you interacting or being near their kids. Can't chill at the park and innocently watch the playground. Dads of children at the playground are viewed as suspicious too. Knowing you're seen as a potential predator until proven otherwise. You're guilty until proven innocent by the public regarding. Society generally does not care about your emotional or physical health. An example is that 33K men die from prostate cancer, and 420,000 women pass from breast cancer. How much public support do you see to fight prostate cancer? Story 8. I wish I could find the story, but a long time ago an FTM trans man wrote an interesting story about what surprised him about living as a man. He had an incident on a crowded bus where he was struggling with multiple suitcases and one exploded open and the others fell off the overhead rack. His lifelong experience as a woman taught him that at this point someone, often a woman, sees someone in need and offers help. This expectation was so deep and visceral that he couldn't understand why people around him weren't helping. Women weren't offering, and men ignored him. Thinking it weird, he shouted out loud, "Why isn't anyone helping me?" Everyone on the bus laughed. He realized at that point something he'd never grasped was the intrinsic aloneness of being a man. He wrote, "I have no built-in allies, as I did when I was female. There is no longer any expectation of help. I am completely alone. Story 9. Everyone expects you to be thriving on your own. No help, nothing. Expected to construct empires out of nothing and to withstand all and any pressures. No one cares about you or how you are. It's kind of the whole expectation placed on Americans in general, I think. There's so much pressure to be successful in this country because if you're not ending up on the street, it is a distinct possibility. On one hand, there's an incredible amount of opportunity available to you in the US. On the other hand, you only have a true safety net if you have a family that has a decent amount of wealth. If you play your cards right, you can end up extremely successful and do and see a lot of cool things. But every game of cards involves the possibility that you get dealt a crap hand, and multiple crap hands can throw you off your game. The pressure is making some people crack. There's always something else that comes up. Most people just want to coast for a bit, but you got to be grateful when you get the opportunity because it's never as long before you wonder what unexpected happens. Story 10. Losing your kids. If your relationship fails is the worst thing I can think of off the top of my head. I'm afraid to have kids for this reason. So this is state by state. In my state, you split all assets and custody of the kids without any adverse events. You usually need to threaten her, get caught doing drugs, or otherwise interfering in the process to get really screwed. A lot of guys just fold and walk from the family and/or house. It's up to you to be your own advocate. If you walk away from your assets and/or family, and then a malicious ex uses that against you, especially before you've consulted lawyers, that's on you. Talk to lawyers for legal decisions, please, fellow men. Story 11. The reality that your only value in the world is in what you provide, not who you are. Chris Rock said it perfectly. Only women, children, and dogs are loved unconditionally. I know a lot of women that say that isn't the truth, but when we lose a job or get injured, a man can immediately feel it. It isn't in our head. When we stop being able to work around the house or a paycheck stops coming in for 1 minute, you can feel the disdain and avarice in the way everyone relates to you. I think the stark realization it would bring, if a woman felt this for literally a split second, would be altering for them. Story 12. Not being able to complain about anything ever again. Now, saying that could work as a joke about how women stereotypically like to complain about stuff a lot. But it's also true. As a bloke, you have to kind of keep a tally in the back of your mind at all times about how many times you have complained about stuff and to what person. Because if you get caught complaining too much, suddenly you're less of a man in a lot of people's eyes. That's why a lot of men don't talk much about their feelings, and that's a contributing factor to why so many have mental health issues. Story 13. The fact that we're not allowed to be sick, have feelings, or show weakness or vulnerability in any way, or will be shamed by women for it. I remember one time I had hurt my foot to the point where I was limping. At work, I kept quiet about it, but when I got home, I was tired and just started going ow out loud every time I limped a step. My GF gave me a weird look and asked what I was doing. When I explained, she basically expressed that I was annoying her and needed to man up. I told her, "This is my home. I'm allowed to be in pain and show weakness here. I won't be told to man up in my own damn home." We didn't share a bed that night. Story 14, probably the general and mostly unspoken in polite society, expectation that if someone is going to be forced to do the dying for a war or whatever else needs meat for a grinder, it is usually men first up. If women were all required to register for selective service in the US on their 18th birthday like men are, there would be a lot more movements and protests against it, in my opinion. The general perception I have is that women are a lot more active and organized than men are when it comes to issues that they think are BS, that they are forced to do under threat of harm or prison. Another close second is the side eye you tend to get as a man just existing alone around your own kids, especially if those kids are girls. I have chosen at times not to stop at the grocery store with my daughter, because when it is just me and her, because I don't have the mental energy to deal with the dirty, suspicious looks from other customers and cashiers trying to gauge if I kidnapped her or whatever else sometimes. Or the judgment you can get from some women, usually busybodies at work, if you make mention of your kid doing something that irritated you or they wore you out when it was just you and them for a long weekend. The thrust of it being you as a piece of crap man should feel lucky you are allowed to spend time with them, no matter what, and are not entitled to get tired from kids just being kids sometimes. I guess just the general notion that because babies are birthed by women that gives them a monopoly on every little thing when it comes to kids. And you, as the father, are just a glorified sperm donor, allowed to hang around, change oil, provide money, and die should it be required. And you should be grateful for it to boot. I should add that my wife is not like that. If she was, we would never have gotten married or had kids. But I have seen my fair share of those situations. Story 15. Giving up on certain dreams in your life so that you can be a provider. For example, I'm sure some men might want to be writers or musicians, or even just be an elementary school teacher. But none of those pay enough to hold down a mortgage or pay for childcare. Of course, many women make this sacrifice as well, but I'd have to guess more men do than women. Story 16. As a trans man, the only thing that has really bothered me about being perceived as a man, though it's obviously still a net positive for me, is that casual physical touch with friends and family isn't socially accepted the way it is for women. When I was still a female, it was the norm to hold hands with your friends, lean on them when standing around, or even just cuddle. Men don't really get to do that. Story 17. The pressure to always seem brave, strong, capable. I'm a woman who can change a tire, end a bug, or carry something heavy. But the thought that I'd be expected to be able to do all stuff automatically just because I'm a male is daunting to me. Case in point, if any of the above were required, my husband would take care of it. Mostly because he coddles me, but also because of societal norms. Story 18. How often you volunteer for stuff. How much people look to you for solutions and then immediately discredit you. How you aren't supposed to hold any major emotions other than happy and sad, and never for longer than a few minutes. How we're expected to be the breadwinners and still fight for women's equality when women are pushing us out of the workplace. How our wants and needs don't matter when a woman wants otherwise. How we can't even interact with children in public without being labeled as a creep or pedo. Most importantly, how men are expected to deal with it regarding life as a whole. Men, especially white men, are being demonized in the West, and we're meant to just take it on the chin and continue going like nothing is wrong. Society hates us, but we know that society depends on us to function, so we continue. Story 19. Lack of intimacy. I know not all girls have it, but generally most girls will receive a lot more emotional support. Most girls, if they became men and were sad after breaking up with their partner, would be shocked when their guy friends will just say, "Sorry to hear that, mate," and little else about it. They certainly will not come over to comfort or hug you. Story 20. You no longer get to just vent. Or you can do it, but it's pointless and makes you feel worse, not better. In general, of course, there are exceptions and special cases to all of this. Ladies, imagine you're at your lowest. You have a problem that you just don't know how you are going to fix. Even if you talk to someone just to vent, chances are good someone is going to offer to help in some way. When you're a man and you do that, you just spend 30 minutes talking about a problem. And at the end of the problem is still there, and 100% still yours to fix. Nothing has changed. I honestly think for a lot of women, that would be the biggest thing. If a woman just talks about a problem long enough, even if they aren't looking for help, the problem will get better. I honestly think a lot of women just don't get that just doesn't work if you're a guy. Story 21. You could just read what women who have lived as men write. I had a friend who transitioned and was shocked by how socially isolated he felt once he started presenting as male. Suddenly, no one was polite to him anymore. No one cared if he got hurt or if things went bad for him. A woman who lived as a man for a year thought she'd be able to easily pick up women and immediately found herself feeling more self-conscious, uncomfortable, and confused by the immediate rejections. Story 22. I think that the emotional landscape for men is very different than it is for women. I think men are socialized to be unemotional. I think men are also extremely alienated from other humans and affection. For women, I get the feeling attention is a spigot you can't turn off, and for men, it's a spigot you can't turn on. For a lot of complex reasons, I think the male experience is extremely isolating and hostile for all but a privileged few in patriarchal cultures. I've heard anecdotes from FTM trans folks that it's a culture shock. Story 23. Being looked at suspiciously for watching my kid play on the playground. In contrast, being praised for being a great dad for bringing my kid to the playground when I know my wife doesn't get the same praise I do for doing the exact same thing. Simultaneously insulting to both of us. To mom, insulting because she feels her child rearing is a given and doesn't need encouragement or praise for it. To dad, insulting because he realizes he is being praised for bare minimum and starts to feel like he could do anything and get praise. So the praise starts to mean very little. Is that right, dads? I made a guess at why it's insulting to you when people do this, but I'm not entirely sure. Story 24, the distrust society gives you around women and children, the body hair, the facial hair, the butt hair, the constant sweat and bad smell, the expectations of manual labor regardless of what you do for work, the lack of choices for fashion, hearing what men actually say about women when no women are around, the rampant toxic masculinity. If you put on weight, it just all goes to the belly. Going bald, always being hot temperature-wise, being told to man up anytime you were upset about anything, being made fun of or judged if you cry, not being able to cry even if you want to, the deep voice. I might be biased on these things, seeing as I'm a trans woman, so I'm just listing things I despised pre-transition. Story 25, the weight of responsibility. The difficulty of providing for a family in this day and age is crushing. But if I fail to provide, my wife and children will be okay. There are people who will help them. There are systems to protect them. I'm unlikely to be offered the same support. Story 26. Never getting compliments and struggling to find someone interested in you with the same personality and level of physical attractiveness. I understand and don't doubt women get inundated with too much of those things, but I'd wager it is worse never getting those things and being alone, and especially to go from what they experience too much to nothing at all. Like, loneliness has made me suicidal multiple times. I hear of excessive attention annoying women, but suicidality over it isn't a thing I heard of. And I wish I could say it was just me, but the data speaks for itself. It really sucks. Story 27, men are seen as providers, not recipients. We're expected to give our livelihoods to someone else and expect nothing in return. We're expected to go through life never opening up or showing emotion to anyone. The few times people do encourage us to open up, it's usually a partner who will have a negative emotional reaction and see you as less of a man afterward, and forever hold anything you shared with them as ammunition during arguments. You'll be viewed as disposable. You have no inherent value beyond what you can give to others, and will be frequently exploited for the same. You will be told to man up frequently just for being human. You are assigned collective guilt for everything wrong any other man has ever done, regardless of your own actions. Meanwhile, you'll constantly be told that you're privileged and benefit from societal bias, but you'll never experience any of it. You'll never be complimented, won't feel like you're good enough, and deserve to be loved as you are, especially if you're not providing something of monetary value in return. It's an inherently lonely and closed-off existence. Story 28. The reactions people would have to them if they started being emotionally open and vulnerable and/or crying. They would hate the belittling and social shunning that would result in most cases with many people. Also, the rarity of external validation and compliments. It would probably be freeing in many respects as compared to the overt harassment they receive as women. But this wouldn't be a happy medium. It would go entirely in the opposite direction. The only thing that would keep them from being largely invisible by default is the fact that many strangers either fear them or see them as potential rivals. Story 29. The fact that almost nobody cares. People listen to women, even if it's just to try to get goodies from them. Does not work that way for men. My friends care, my family cares. Most everyone else gives precisely zero concern unless they are expecting something from me, and then only cares so far as it affects my provision of said things, such as life. Story 30. Constantly worrying about not looking like a creep. Seriously, this thing is exhausting. I'm a 5 feet 10 inches, 225 pounds, muscular black dude. I know damn well that I'm probably the last person a woman, or anyone for that matter, wants to see walking behind them while they are alone at night. I work in retail too, so there's times where I will walk around the store just to avoid walking behind women, just to make them feel better. Just to be clear, I'm not saying that women aren't justified for being wary. I completely understand why they might feel that way, but it just sucks constantly trying to make sure I don't accidentally look like a creep. Story 31. I'm 6'1", 265 pounds. Brown, bald. No one has sat next to me on a bus in years. A child refused to sit next to me on a flight once and threw a tantrum about it. I ignored her the entire time, but that hurt. I cried watching Coco. I know the feeling. One time an old white lady came up to me randomly and asked me to help carry her bags onto the bus. I lived off that high for days. As a big black man, I'm used to being followed around in shops, people crossing the road when they see me walking toward them, random police searches, pearl clutching, etc. One time, a dude came up to me and tried to get me to stop seeing his friend because he thought black men treat white women like trash and he's just looking out for his friend. I'm still friends with that girl today.